Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into a topic that is, it's really on the frontier. It's one of the most high stakes and sensitive areas in all of health research.
Absolutely.
We're talking about the role of these incredibly specialized multi-component nutritional and herbal protocols in managing severe psychotic spectrum disorders.
Conditions like schizophrenia.
Exactly.
And, it's not just a complex topic, it's an urgent one. For decades, the standard approach has been, conventional antipsychotic pharmaceuticals.
Right.
And they've really excelled at one thing and one thing only.
And what's that?
Managing the acute, what we call positive symptoms, the hallucinations, the delusions. They do that by effectively blocking dopamine receptors.
And that dopamine blockade is absolutely critical for stabilizing someone in a crisis. We're not debating that.
Not at all, but the clinical reality is,
Yeah.
It's that they often fail miserably when it comes to long-term recovery.
Because they just don't touch the most debilitating chronic parts of the illness.
Exactly. The negative symptoms.
We're talking about that pervasive apathy, the anhedonia, just the complete inability to feel pleasure.
And the severe progressive cognitive decline.
Yeah.
That brain fog that people describe, it's crushing.
Right. And then you have the compounding tragedy of the side effects.
Oh, it's awful. We're talking about severe long-term consequences.
Things like rapid weight gain, leading to metabolic syndrome, diabetes.
Movement disorders like tardive dyskinesia, which can be permanent. And maybe the most disturbing thing, there's evidence suggesting chronic use might even accelerate cerebral atrophy.
So the treatment itself is introducing new chronic diseases that just tank a person's quality of life.
It's a huge problem.
So this reality has driven researchers and, specialized practitioners to ask a really fundamental question.
A necessary question.
What if we stopped just exclusively treating the dopamine receptors and started treating the underlying pathophysiology?
What if we actually went after the root causes?
Yeah. The mitochondrial dysfunction, the chronic inflammation, the subtle failures in glutamate signaling.
That's the core of our deep dive today. We've analyzed this advanced multi-component protocol that some clinicians are proposing as an adjuvant, a support system.
Or in some cases, even a replacement for conventional antipsychotics.
Right. And this isn't just a handful of vitamins. I want to be really clear about that. We are talking about 32 distinct nutrients, plus 3 incredibly powerful, specialized botanical agents.
And it's all based on comprehensive pharmacogenomic analysis. This is precision intervention.
It has to be.
And this brings us right to the central paradox, the thing that makes this deep dive so necessary.
It's a huge tension.
If you zoom out, standard antipsychotics are dopamine blockers. Their whole job is to suppress that activity.
Right.
Yet several of the most powerful agents in this nutritional protocol are designed specifically to increase dopaminergic activity. They're dopamine boosters.
The tension couldn't be starker.
Yeah.
You're trying to treat a disorder that's defined by both an excess of dopamine signaling.
That's the paranoia, the delusions.
And a severe deficit.
The negative symptoms, the cognitive fatigue, the hypofrontalism.
So to introduce these potent compounds that push the dopamine system, it requires what the sources repeatedly stress is surgical precision.
Because without knowing exactly how a patient's body handles dopamine, you're not giving them a supplement.
No. You are essentially administering a psychoactive toxin that could trigger mania or an acute psychosis.
So our goal for you, the listener, is not to endorse this protocol. It's to provide the granular knowledge you need to understand why this complexity exists.
We want you to grasp why just grabbing these things off the shelf is profoundly hazardous in this specific clinical context.
And why mandatory genetic and functional screening is the only ethically and scientifically responsible way to even attempt such a high-stakes neurochemical intervention. This is really a manual for safety and understanding. Okay, so let's begin where any systemic repair should, with the engine of the cell.
The mitochondria.
Right. If the standard pharmaceutical approach is basically symptom management, this protocol starts with foundational repair. What are the core defects it's actually trying to correct?
We're moving way beyond the simple dopamine hypothesis here.
Yeah.
The 3 fundamental processes being targeted, and these are increasingly confirmed in the literature, are 1, mitochondrial dysfunction.
Okay.
Specifically, defects in what's called oxidative phosphorylation, or OXPHOS. 2 is chronic neuroinflammation. And 3 is critical NMDA receptor hypofunction.
So the brain is literally underperforming, it's inflamed, and it's starving for energy.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's in an energizing crisis.
And that starvation aspect, that energizing crisis, that feels central to the brain fog and that crushing apathy of the negative symptoms.
It is.
So if the brain is starving, the first most crucial step has to be fixing the energy production system.
The mitochondria. Let's talk about what the sources call the safe core of this strategy. The mitochondrial cocktail.
Okay, the safe core. I like that.
This strategy is highly targeted. It's not about singular high doses, it's all about synergy. It focuses directly on optimizing the electron transport chain, or ETC.
And the ETC is amindus.
Think of it as the assembly line inside the mitochondria that generates usable energy, or ATP. The goal is to reverse mitochondrial failure and deal with the consequences of low energy in the prefrontal cortex, which is known as hypofrontalism.
Got it. So let's break down the 4 components that make up this core. The first one is fascinating. Sjilajit Resin Extract. We hear about adaptogens all the time, but what is Sjilajit actually doing at the biochemical level of the ETC?
Sjilajit is really unique. It's a very complex phytocomplex. It's rich in something called fulvic acid and a class of compounds called dibenzoalpha-pyrones, or DBPs.
Okay.
Now, to understand its mechanism, you first have to understand the flaw in the engine that we're trying to fix.
And that flaw is?
A really consistent critical finding in the neuropathology of schizophrenia is a functional defect at complex I of the electron transport chain.
Complex I. So that's the first major entry point for electrons into the power assembly line.
It's the very start.
Mm-hmm.
And if complex I is defective, the whole system just backs up and ATP production plummets.
So the power assembly line is broken right at the beginning.
Correct. And this is where Sjilajit's DBPs and fulvic acid come into play. They act essentially as an emergency bypass system.
A bypass.
An electron shuttle and reservoir.
Yeah.
They can transfer electrons directly, completely bypassing that broken complex I, and feed them further down the chain.
Wow.
This significantly restores and increases the final output of ATP. For someone suffering from that profound cognitive fatigue, this offers a direct therapeutic path to restore usable brain energy.
That's a phenomenal piece of biological engineering. It doesn't fix the original broken part, but it reroutes the system so energy production can keep going.
Precisely. And that leads us directly to the second component, which is coenzyme Q10, or ubiquinone.
CoQ10, we hear about that for heart health.
Right, but its role in energy transport is universal. It's essential for transporting those electrons from the initial complexes, IM2, over to complex 3.
So what's the synergistic twist here? Because just, stacking supplements doesn't usually create magic.
The magic is that Sjilajit doesn't just coexist with CoQ10. It acts as its chemical stabilizer.
What do you mean?
CoQ10 is most effective in its active, reduced form, which is called ubiquinol. But this molecule is notoriously unstable. It oxidizes really easily.
Okay.
Sjilajit actively prevents this oxidation. It stabilizes CoQ10 in that active form.
So you have the DBPs bypassing the block and then ensuring the transport vehicle, the CoQ10, is always fully charged and ready to go.
Exactly. The synergy becomes exponential. Research indicates that this combined administration Sjilajit stabilizing active CoQ10 can lead to an exponential increase in overall ATP synthesis compared to just taking high doses of CoQ10 by itself.
Clinically, that's huge.
It's huge. It's not just a small cognitive boost. This is fundamentally changing the energy balance in areas of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex, that have been starved for years.
And that energy boost directly targets the hypofrontalism, that inability to plan, focus, and initiate action.
It's a direct hit on negative symptoms.
All right, moving on. The third component is nicotinamide riboside, or NR.
NR is all about the fuel tank. It's an NAD salvage precursor. NAD is the ultimate non-negotiable fuel source, not just for the entire mitochondrial function, but also for vital enzymes like sirtuins, which are involved in cellular repair and longevity.
So by supplementing NR, we're just making sure the mitochondria, which are already being repaired by the Sjilajit, have plenty of high-octane fuel for complex I and everything after it.
You're filling up the tank.
So we have the bypass, the transport, and the fuel. The final piece of this core puzzle is L-carnitin.
L-carnitine's role is logistical, but it's absolutely critical. Think of it as the delivery truck. Its job is to transport long-chain fatty acids across the mitochondrial membrane.
And fatty acids are a key fuel source.
A key fuel source. They're broken down inside the mitochondria via beta oxidation to generate a ton of energy.
So if the delivery truck breaks down, the factory stops, even if you have all the other components ready to go.
Precisely. If L-carnitine levels are deficient, which is common in a lot of metabolic illnesses, the fatty acids just can't get inside the mitochondria. The cell starves, even with plenty of available fuel in the bloodstream. By including L-carnitine, the protocol ensures that the entire process, from raw material delivery to final ATP production, is supported.
So if we pull this all together, what we have is a scientifically bulletproof 4-part strategy aimed at reversing the fundamental mitochondrial dysfunction that underpins cognitive and negative symptoms.
Right.
This SAFE core, these 4, plus the core anti-inflammatory agents we'll get to later, this represents a powerful baseline intervention that minimizes immediate neurochemical risk.
It's the essential first step. It addresses systemic failures without directly flooding the system with high-risk psychoactive agents. But that safety net comes off very, very quickly when we move to the next set of ingredients.
And this is where we shift gears dramatically. We're moving from basic repair work to, I guess, installing a massive upgrade that involves significant risk.
A very significant risk.
We're talking about the specialized agents that intervene directly at the receptor and enzyme level. We need to introduce the big 3, Sjilajit, Tribulus Terrestris, and Saw Palmetto.
And we have to stress, these are not gentle nutrients.
No.
This is the high-stakes territory. This is the turbocharger that can send the entire system into overdrive. These 3 agents are highly bioactive, they cross the blood-brain barrier, and they directly impact monoamine systems.
And this is where the risk of precipitating acute psychosis or Serenoa or mania is introduced.
And it's why genetic screening becomes mandatory, not optional.
So let's return to Sjilajit, since it appeared in the SAFE core. But now we need to examine its psychoactive side. We established it's a mitochondrial powerhouse, but what is it doing to neurotransmitter levels?
Sjilajit is a potent psychotropic modulator. That means it acts on the mind. Preclinical data strongly suggests it increases concentrations of dopamine in 2 key areas, the cortex and the hippocampus.
So this is the deliberate push on the accelerator pedal.
It is. If a patient is suffering from that profound apathy, that lack of motivation, that low baseline dopamine tone, which is the signature of negative symptoms, this is the targeted intervention.
Okay, but if we're deliberately increasing dopamine, which is the very neurotransmitter implicated in the pathology of psychosis, how does the protocol propose to manage the risk of, overstimulation?
This is the elegance of the compound itself. The same Sjilajit that boosts dopamine also exhibits potent GABA-mimetic properties.
And GABA is the primary inhibitory calming neurotransmitter in the brain.
It's the main brake pedal. Sjilajit activates both glycine and GABA receptors.
So it's building its own counterbalance.
Exactly. It provides an inherent, essential sedating and anxiolytic counterbalance to that dopamine increase. It's a built-in safety feature. If you just introduce a pure dopamine precursor, you are running a huge risk. But here, the compound carries its own natural regulatory mechanism.
Which makes the introduction of the dopaminergic component a bit safer, though still not risk-free.
Still not risk-free, but much more balanced.
And before we leave Sjilajit, let's just touch on its structural long-term benefit. You mentioned its ability to bind to tau protein.
Yeah, this is the long view, and it's critical. Fulvic acid, one of the main components of Sjilajit, binds to and prevents the aggregation of tau protein into what are called neurofibrillary tangles.
Which is a hallmark of Alzheimer's.
Right, but chronic psychosis is also a progressive illness associated with neuronal loss and structural changes in the brain. This tau aggregation prevention mechanism suggests Sjilajit might offer a long-term structural neuroprotective benefit. It could potentially slow the underlying neurodegenerative process that's associated with chronic psychotic illness.
Okay, now, let's pivot to the agent with what sounds like the highest pharmacological risk profile, Tribulus Terrestris. I mean, it's known in gym culture for boosting testosterone, but the mechanism here is far more dramatic and dangerous.
Tribulus is a profound, non-discriminatory intervention in neurochemistry. It contains these things called beta-carboline alkaloids, harmine and norharmine.
And what do you do?
Their function is to act as potent, reversible inhibitors of monoamine oxidase A, or MAO-A.
We have to stop there and emphasize this. MAO inhibitors are pharmaceutical-grade antidepressants. This is not a casual supplement.
Not at all. They are powerful drugs that require strict dietary and medication management. MAO-A is the crucial enzyme in the brain responsible for breaking down the major monoamines.
Dopamine, noradrenaline, and serotonin.
All three. By blocking this enzyme, Tribulus prevents the clearance of all of them. You're simultaneously jacking up the concentration of the three most powerful neurochemicals in the system.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster unless you know the clearance rate of the patient, which we will get to.
Ab-
But if this is being used to treat negative symptoms, it's because it delivers a massive push.
It delivers a massive push by amplifying signaling across the board. And then there's the endocrine connection.
What's that?
The steroidal saponine proteadeosine in Tribulus increases the density of androgen receptors, particularly in the brain. Since androgens are known modulators that amplify dopamine release and sensitivity, you get a double whammy.
So an increase in concentration from the MAO inhibition.
And an amplification of the downstream effects via the hormonal axis. This makes it an incredibly effective tool for apathy and low libido, but it dramatically compounds the risk of agitation or mania.
Okay, let's move to the third agent in this risky trio. Saw Palmetto, or Serenoa, repens. This seems counterintuitive. I mean, it's used primarily for managing an enlarged prostate. How does a prostate herb pose a neurochemical threat?
This is a textbook example of unintended central nervous system consequences, and it's all through the neurosteroid pathway. Saw Palmetto's mechanism is well known. It inhibits the enzyme 5-alpha reductase, or 5-AR. That enzyme is what converts testosterone to the more potent dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. That's its prostate effect.
But 5-AR isn't just in the prostate.
Not at all. In the brain, 5-AR is necessary for a completely different critical process.
Yeah.
The synthesis of allopregnanolone.
Allopregnanolone.
It's a neurosteroid derived from progesterone, and it's one of the brain's most powerful natural tranquilizers. It acts as a positive allosteric modulator of the GABA receptor.
So it's basically the brain's internal Valium. It reinforces the calming signals.
Exactly. It significantly enhances the inhibitory effects of GABA. So if Palmetto inhibits 5-AR, even if it's being taken for a totally separate issue, the theoretical safety caveat is immense.
You could inadvertently deplete or reduce the availability of this natural tranquilizer in the brain.
You could. And for someone who's already struggling with an inhibitory deficit, a weakened GABA system, this completion could be catastrophic.
It would remove a crucial layer of natural protection.
It potentially weakens the brain's ability to turn down the noise, which could lead to increased baseline anxiety, agitation, emotional ability, or even increased susceptibility to panic and mania.
So the intervention meant for prostate health is now interfering with the fundamental balance between excitation and inhibition in the brain.
And that's why these big three require the most stringent risk-benefit analysis and, again, genetic confirmation before they're ever used.
The conversation about these psychoactive agents just necessitates a really detailed discussion of the acute dangers. If these compounds are this high-powered, we need to spend serious time illustrating the clinical crises they could trigger if they're combined carelessly or used in the wrong person.
We absolutely must detail the actual crises. These are not just minor side effects. We are talking about life-threatening events or the immediate precipitation of severe psychotic episodes.
Let's start with the most immediate and potentially catastrophic one, the hypertensive or psychotic crisis, the dopaminergic storm. This involves L-Phenylalanine and Tribulus Terrestris.
This is a classic textbook pharmacological conflict. L-phenylalanine is an essential amino acid. It serves as a direct precursor to the catecholamines.
So it gets turned into dopamine?
Sequentially. It's metabolized into tyrosine, then LDOPA, and finally dopamine. You are deliberately introducing the raw material for dopamine synthesis.
And then you add Tribulus into the mix.
You introduce Tribulus, which is a potent MAO-A inhibitor. It blocks the clearance of that newly synthesized dopamine and its downstream metabolites, noradrenaline and serotonin.
So you've maximized production and blocked the emergency exit.
Exactly. The result is an explosive accumulation of catecholamines.
This sounds identical to the warnings that patients get when they're prescribed pharmaceutical MAO inhibitors about dietary restrictions.
It is identical. The only difference is this combination is self-administered and potentially totally unmonitored. This dangerous accumulation is amplified dramatically if the patient consumes tyramine-rich foods.
The cheese effect.
The cheese effect. Aged cheeses, cured meats, certain fermented products. Tyramine acts as a releaser of already stored monoamines, so it just throws fuel on the fire.
What does a hypertensive crisis actually feel like, and why is it so dangerous?
It is terrifying, and it is life-threatening. The patient experiences an acute, dangerous spike in blood pressure. We're talking often over a 98/120.
Wow.
Symptoms include excruciating headaches, profuse sweating, a rapid heart rate, confusion, and sometimes stroke. And if it manifests purely as a neurochemical imbalance, the acute dopamine accumulation can trigger an immediate, overwhelming psychotic episode.
Characterized by what?
Severe paranoia, high agitation, and full-blown mania. This interaction is absolutely contraindicated for broad consumption. The gravity cannot be overstated.
Okay. Moving to the second acute neurochemical crisis, serotonin syndrome. This interaction involves rhodiola rosea and, again, Tribulus terrestris.
Right. Serotonin syndrome is the result of excessive serotonin activity in the central and peripheral nervous systems. Rhodiola is an adaptogen. It's often included for stress and fatigue, but it possesses mild MAO inhibiting properties, and it modulates serotonin uptake.
So by itself, it's usually safe.
By itself, it's usually fine, but you combine it with Tribulus.
And you cross a critical threshold.
You do. You have the potent MAO-A inhibition from the Tribulus, plus the mild cumulative MAO inhibition and serotonergic activity of the rhodiola. The total effect sends serotonin levels into the toxic range. And this risk is amplified if the patient is also on, say, a low dose of an antidepressant, an SSRI, that they haven't disclosed.
And what's the clinical picture of serotonin syndrome?
It requires immediate emergency care, and it can be fatal. It presents as a triad of symptoms.
A triad.
First, neuromuscular hyperactivity, so muscle stiffness, hyperreflexia, clonus, which is involuntary muscle contractions. Second, autonomic instability, sudden high fevers, a rapid heart rate, severe fluctuations in blood pressure. And third, mental status changes. Acute agitation, confusion, delirium. The interaction between two herbal MAO inhibitors is a serious and very often underestimated danger.
Okay, so beyond the neurotransmitter emergencies, the source material flags a major cumulative risk that involves several common, seemingly benign supplements. You're talking about the cumulative bleeding risk.
This is a safety issue that catches a lot of practitioners off guard because they assess each supplement in isolation.
But they add up.
They add up. Many natural substances have mild antiplatelet or anticoagulant properties. When you combine 5 or 6 of them, the effect shifts from mild to significant.
And this protocol combines a major group of them.
It does. We have Saw Palmetto, omega-3 fish oil, especially high EPA, curcumin from turmeric extract, high doses of vitamin E, and bromelain, which is a digestive enzyme with fibrinolytic properties.
So all 5 of those contribute to reduced clotting.
Correct. That's a massive cumulative effect.
And what's the real-world consequence for the patient?
The clinical consequence is a significant risk of spontaneous bleeding, severe and easy bruising, or frequent epistaxis nosebleeds. The key safety warning here is mandatory.
Which is?
Any patient on this protocol must be strictly monitored for these signs, and all 5 of these components must be ceased, ideally 2 full weeks prior to any invasive procedure.
That includes dental work, biopsies, any minor surgeries.
Anything. And ensuring this level of rigorous compliance in a patient population that's already struggling with cognitive function is a major practical and ethical challenge.
That's a really powerful point on compliance. Okay, finally, a specific alert about photosensitivity that is often overlooked in supplement literature.
Yes. There are well-documented case reports linking systemic photosensitivity, so a severe painful dermatitis, specifically to Tribulus Terrestris extract upon sun exposure.
So for a patient using this protocol, especially if they spend time outdoors or live in a sunny place, they need to be warned.
They have to be given a clear warning about sun avoidance or rigorous use of SPF protection. It's an easy safety warning to miss, but the physical consequences can be really severe.
This is the section that really defines this deep dive. If the last section demonstrated the catastrophic risk, this section explains the only way to manage it. Mandatory personalized screening.
Right.
The difference between a medicine and a toxin in this context is measured entirely by the patient's specific genome. So why is generic, off-the-shelf supplementation just unacceptable here?
Because the effectiveness and safety of this protocol is entirely contingent on the patient's individual ability to clear monoamines. If you introduce a powerful dopamine booster or an MAO inhibitor into someone who is genetically predisposed to slow clearance, you are not treating their illness. You are inducing a crisis.
So genetic testing dictates which of these high-risk components, like Tribulus or L-Phenylalanine, have to be removed entirely.
Or dosed very conservatively. It moves the practice from blind guessing to precision medicine.
Let's start with the cornerstone. COMT Val-158-MET, catechol-O-methyltransferase. This enzyme is the primary regulator of dopamine clearance in the prefrontal cortex. The single gene determines almost everything about how a patient responds to these high-risk supplements.
It is the ultimate determining factor. COMT is so crucial because the prefrontal cortex, the seat of executive function and motivation, it lacks the other clearance mechanisms found elsewhere in the brain. COMT is responsible for breaking down dopamine, noradrenaline, and adrenaline right there. And the Val158-MET polymorphism dictates the speed of this enzyme.
Okay, let's detail the two major genotypes, starting with the Val-Val or the warrior gene.
The Val-Val genotype results in a fast COMT enzyme. These individuals clear dopamine rapidly, sometimes up to 4 times faster than the MET-MET group.
Okay.
In the prefrontal cortex, this often leads to lower baseline dopamine levels. Clinically, they are the warriors because they handle stress well, process information quickly, they're less prone to anxiety. However, their lower baseline dopamine makes them highly susceptible to the negative symptoms of psychosis.
The apathy, lack of drive, chronic fatigue.
The hypofrontalism, yes.
But conversely, this makes them the ideal candidate for the dopaminergic push.
Exactly. For the Val-Val patient, the addition of Sjilajit and L-Phenylalanine is potentially therapeutic. It helps raise their deficient baseline dopamine, possibly reversing their anhedonia and apathy without risking hyperstimulation.
Now, let's look at the other side of the coin. The MET-MET genotype, the warrior gene.
The MET-MET genotype results in a slow COMT enzyme. It operates at only about 25 to 40% of the speed of the Val-Val enzyme.
So they break down dopamine, noradrenaline, and adrenaline very slowly.
Very slowly. This leads to high baseline levels of dopamine in their prefrontal cortex. Clinically, they are the warriors. They are highly sensitive to stress, prone to rumination, anxiety disorders, OCD, and they are exquisitely sensitive to stimulants.
And what happens when we introduce a dopamine booster like L-Phenylalanine or Tribulus to the MET-MET patient?
It is absolutely contraindicated, and it is highly dangerous. They cannot process the added dopamine load. Introducing these agents will almost certainly precipitate severe anxiety, panic attacks, paranoia, or full-blown manias or psychoses.
We're talking about an immediate symptomatic worsening.
Immediate. For them, the high-risk components of the protocol must be removed entirely. It is a fundamental safety switch based on a single piece of genetic data.
That clarity is essential. Okay, next, let's consider MAO-A UVNTR. This relates directly to the mechanism of Tribulus.
Right. So Monoamine Oxidase A is involved in clearing all 3 major monoamines, dopamine, noradrenaline, and serotonin, outside of the prefrontal cortex. The MAO-A gene has a variation of variable number tandem repeat that determines its activity level.
And you can have fast or slow clearance.
You can. The high activity allele, usually the 4 repeat, is associated with fast clearance, and the low activity allele, the 3 repeat, is associated with slow clearance.
So if the patient has the genetically slow 3 repeat MAO-A allele,
they are already slow at breaking down serotonin and noradrenaline. Adding Tribulus, which is a potent MAO inhibitor, is literally pouring gasoline on a fire. You exacerbate the genetic defect, creating an immediate risk of toxic monoamine accumulation.
which presents clinically as extreme irritability, agitation, aggression.
Or, as we discussed, serotonin syndrome when you combine it with rhodiola. Testing MAO-A is crucial for establishing the safety parameters for using any MAO-inhibiting botanical.
We also have to address the interactions with traditional psychiatric medication, which means screening for the CYP450 drug metabolism enzymes, CYP2D6 and CYP3A4. This is the liver's chemical cleanup factory.
This is perhaps the most dangerous interaction during the critical tapering phase. The vast majority of psychiatric medications, antipsychotics like risperidone or haloperidol, and many antidepressants, are primarily metabolized by these CYP450 enzymes, and the speed at which a patient metabolizes these drugs is highly variable and genetically determined.
And the risk here comes from two specific supplements in the protocol.
Yes, berberine and rhodiola. Both are potent, non-selective inhibitors of CYP2D6 and CYP3A4. If a patient is determined to be a poor metabolizer genetically, meaning their enzymes are already slow or even just a normal metabolizer, and they introduce these herbal inhibitors,
The waste disposal crew gets blocked entirely.
Precisely. Let's say a patient is meticulously lowering their clozapine dose over weeks. They introduce berberine for its metabolic benefits. Berberine blocks the enzyme that breaks down clozapine.
So what happens?
The result is that the concentration of clozapine in their blood plasma suddenly skyrockets. It mimics a massive dose increase or an overdose, even though the patient diligently took a lower pill dose.
And that can lead to severe adverse reactions.
Seizures, sedation, acute toxicity. It is a leading cause of failure during psychiatric drug tapering. CYP450 screening is mandatory before combining these herbal inhibitors with any ongoing pharmaceutical regimen.
Moving away from genetics to functional biochemistry, let's discuss the critical markers used in functional psychiatric models, specifically pyroluria and the copper-zinc balance. These address underlying deficiencies that can drive the symptoms.
Pyroluria is often overlooked but is profoundly important. It's a genetic condition where the body produces excessive levels of something called cryptopyrroles, or HPL.
Okay.
HDL is a structural component of red blood cell synthesis, but when it's produced in excess, it binds irreversibly to two absolutely critical nutrients, vitamin B6 in its active P5P form, and zinc.
So the patient is constantly flushing out these core nutrients no matter how healthy their diet is.
They live in a state of severe functional deficiency of B6 and zinc. Clinically, this deficiency correlates strongly with psychiatric symptoms.
Like what?
B6 is essential for over 100 enzymatic reactions, including all neurotransmitter synthesis. Zinc is vital for GABA receptors and overall neuronal stability. The classic pyroluria clinical presentation is severe internal tension, chronic anxiety, episodic rage, extreme sensitivity to stress, and a characteristic aversion to high-protein breakfast. These symptoms can easily mimic or exacerbate psychotic illness.
So how does the protocol adapt to a positive HPL test?
Well, the standard doses of B6 and zinc included in the protocol are entirely insufficient for these patients. A positive test mandates megadosing. We're talking often 200 to 500 milligrams of B6 and 30 to 100 milligrams of zinc.
And for some patients, correcting this can be profoundly curative.
For a subset of patients, yes. It demonstrates that the root cause was simple deficiency, not complex neurochemistry in that specific area.
Okay, finally, let's analyze the crucial copper-zinc balance. Why does the ratio matter so much for paranoia and anxiety?
Free copper is a potent neurotoxin. When copper is high relative to zinc, it directly stimulates an enzyme called dopamine beta-hydroxylase. This enzyme converts dopamine into noradrenaline.
So excess copper drives this conversion pathway into overdrive. So a patient gets a specific chemical imbalance from this mineral imbalance.
Yes. They develop a highly specific psychiatric profile. Low dopamine, which leads to anhedonia and apathy, combined with sky-high noradrenaline, which leads to intense paranoia, anxiety, panic, and agitation. High copper is often misdiagnosed as paranoid schizophrenia because the patient is perpetually hypervigilant and anxious.
So what's the mandate for managing this?
If the serum ratio is off, you must, first and foremost, strictly avoid any supplement containing copper. Then you use therapeutic doses of zinc, often supported by molybdenum, as an antagonist to promote the safe excretion of the excess copper.
And you absolutely cannot introduce the dopaminergic component.
Absolutely not. You cannot introduce Sjilajit or L-Phenylalanine because they will only provide more substrate for the copper-driven enzyme to convert into noradrenaline, thereby worsening the patient's paranoia and anxiety. This functional screening is just as crucial as the genetic screening for safety.
So we've covered the core repair and the high-stakes agents. Let's now round out the remaining support components that turn this protocol into a truly systemic approach, starting with the neurotransmitter support and the methylation group.
This group is essential because methylation is really the foundation of all cell health. We include 5-MTHF, which is the active form of folate, and a comprehensive B complex. Methylation drives DNA repair, detoxification, and is absolutely necessary for the function of that COMT enzyme we just talked about.
And for synthesizing all the monoamines.
All of them.
Now, 5-MTHF is particularly important for MTHFR mutation carriers.
Correct. For the huge portion of the population with MTHFR gene variations, their body struggles to convert folic acid into the usable 5-MTHF. So supplementing the active form is non-negotiable for improving overall neurotransmitter efficiency.
But even here, we have to maintain a cautionary lens.
We do. There's the phenomenon of overmethylating.
Tell us about that.
Some patients are identified as overmethylators. They often have a low histamine phenotype and a high genetic methylation capacity. For these individuals, symptoms frequently include high anxiety, severe internal tension, and paranoia. Adding excessive methyl donors like high doses of 5-MTHF or methyl B12 can actually overstimulate their system. It can epigenetically downregulate key neurotransmitter receptors, especially for serotonin and dopamine, which just worsens their underlying paranoia and agitation. A careful introduction and monitoring of the dose response is vital, even for these foundational nutrients.
And once again, L-Phenylalanine appears, forcing us to reiterate its careful placement in this whole protocol.
L-Phenylalanine is a direct dopamine precursor. It's used here to treat deficiency states like profound depression, fatigue, and anhedonia. But it is an intervention, not a routine supplement.
Right.
It must be restricted to patients whose lab work and genetic profile, the Valvolcano-MT, confirm a safe deficiency state. It is an absolute contraindication for anyone with phenylketonuria or PKU.
And highly contraindicated in those MET-MET-COMT patients.
Exactly. Its inclusion really emphasizes the targeted precision nature of this protocol.
Okay, moving on to the powerful glutamate anti-inflammatory axis. The star of this entire support group seems to be N-Acetylcysteine, or NAC.
NEC has rapidly moved from just a health supplement to a frontline therapeutic agent. It has significant positive data from clinical trials in schizophrenia.
And its action is twofold.
It's twofold and highly sophisticated. Firstly, it provides cysteine, which is the rate-limiting amino acid for synthesizing glutathione, the body's master antioxidant and detoxifier.
And the second action addresses the glutamate issue.
This is the crucial part. It modulates the cysteine glutamate antiporter, known as $60.
The $60 antiporter.
It sits on the outside of glial cells. It essentially swaps one molecule of cysteine, which is needed inside the cell, for one molecule of glutamate, which gets released outside the cell.
So if that antiporter is overactive, you're flooding the outside of the neuron with glutamate.
That's right. And this external glutamate overstimulation leads to excitotoxicity, where neurons are overfired and damaged. It also contributes to the NMDA receptor hypofunction, which is central to psychosis.
So by supplying NAC.
By supplying NAC, we are giving the cell an alternative source of cysteine, which helps regulate and slow down that X-dopa antiporter.
And the clinical result of that is?
You normalize the dangerously high extracellular glutamate levels. This reduction in excitotoxicity has profound therapeutic effects. Clinically, it has been shown to improve both negative symptoms by normalizing neuronal activity, and interestingly, it is highly effective at reducing addictive behaviors.
Like craving for cannabis and nicotine.
Which are often comorbidities in this population. It's a really powerful tool.
And NAC works hand in glove with the healthy fats, specifically omega-3 fish oil.
It does. Omega-3's EPA and DHA are essential structural components. They maintain neuronal membrane fluidity. If the membrane is stiff and rigid, receptors can't function properly.
And omega-3s are consistently found to be depleted in individuals with schizophrenia.
Consistently.
Yeah.
Furthermore, there are potent anti-inflammatory agents. They work synergistically with the B vitamins and 5-MTHF to lower homocysteine, which is a classic marker for systemic and neuroinflammation. Chronic microglial activation brain inflammation is now recognized as a major driver of psychotic progression, so this intervention is critical for long-term stabilization.
Finally, let's discuss the metabolic and hormonal wins offered by this protocol. This is about correcting the collateral damage caused by past pharmaceutical treatments.
This is where the protocol provides genuine systemic reversal of iatrogenic damage, the damage caused by the treatment itself. Antipsychotic use causes metabolic syndrome and massive insulin resistance in a staggering percentage of long-term users. Berberine and myo-inositol are included specifically to counteract this.
And berberine is often compared to the pharmaceutical metformin.
Yes. Berberine activates the AMPK pathway, the cellular master switch for metabolism, which significantly boosts insulin sensitivity and improves glucose utilization. Myo-inositol has similar metabolic benefits and is also a precursor for the second messenger system in cells, which is why it is often used as a stabilizer in mood disorders.
So the combination of berberine and myo-inositol is designed to significantly reverse that metabolic damage.
The insulin resistance, the weight gain, all the things that plague this patient population.
And we circle back one last time to the importance of that inhibitory break with the inclusion of L-taurine.
L-taurine is another essential amino acid. Its primary action is as a direct GABA agonist, much like Sjilajit. It reinforces the inhibitory system. Given that the protocol contains several excitatory elements, Sjilajit, L-Phenylalanine, Tribulus L-taurine provides crucial, safe reinforcement for the inhibitory signals. It supports calm, reduces anxiety, and helps maintain that necessary balance against the high-octane dopaminergic push.
So what this extensive deep dive has shown is that this advanced protocol moves, light years beyond simple nutritional support.
It really does.
It is a targeted, multisystemic intervention designed to address core systemic failures, mitochondrial collapse, neuroinflammation, glutamate dysregulation, all of which underpin psychotic symptoms.
It offers genuine hope for systemic recovery, not just symptomatic masking.
But the magnitude of that potential reward is matched only by the magnitude of the risks.
Exactly. We've seen that the difference between administering a medicine that restores energy and providing a compound that triggers acute psychosis is measured in the precision of the dose, and most critically, the patient's specific genetic profile.
Let's just consolidate the mandatory phased implementation strategy based on our analysis.
The initial phase has to be strict. It must stick to the safe core elements. This includes the mitochondrial components.
CoQ10, Shilajit, NR, L-carnitine.
Right. The anti-inflammatory agents like NSE, omega-3s, curcumin, and the foundational support like taurine and the B complex. These address the systemic failure points and are broadly beneficial for cognitive function.
And only once systemic stability is established and the genetic data is processed, do you even think about moving into the high-risk zone?
Absolutely. The risky additions, the potent dopamine boosters like Tribulus Terrestris and L-Phenylalanine, are introduced only if two conditions are met.
Okay, what are they?
One, the patient is clinically stable, and two, they suffered from debilitating negative symptoms like apathy or anhedonia. And crucially, their pharmacogenomic profile must show fast clearance genes.
The COMT-VAL-VAL and the MAO-A for repeat genotypes.
Exactly. Confirming their system can safely handle the increased monoamine load without risking a crisis.
And a final caution on medication interactions.
You never, ever introduce potent CYP450 inhibitors like berberine or rhodiola while the patient is still tapering off existing medications metabolized by those enzymes.
Unless you want to risk inducing an overdose.
Precision, individualized biochemistry, and continuous monitoring are mandatory. Anything less is just highly dangerous.
Our analysis today confirms that the safe management of advanced nutrient therapy for severe psychiatric illness requires mandatory genetic screening for markers like COMT, MAO-A, and the CYP450 enzymes. The knowledge is available, and the stakes are simply too high to ignore it.
Which leads us to the final, necessary question that this deep dive really forces us to confront.
Go on.
If the safe and effective use of a nutrient protocol demands this level of personalized mandatory genetic screening, doesn't that fundamentally imply that any powerful psychoactive intervention, be it herbal, nutraceutical, or traditional pharmaceutical, should mandate genetic testing before it is ever prescribed?
Should individualized genetic safety screening become the ethical standard, not the exception, for all brain-altering therapies? Something to ponder as you continue your own deep dive into this challenging and fascinating frontier of precision health. Thank you for joining us.